welcome to the late night frequency of Echo FM. I am your host, Alistair. Tonight, our news cycle has achieved a truly impressive level of structural incoherence. We begin with the announcement that our new Attorney General was confirmed by a narrow margin, a man whose primary credential appears to be his previous role as a criminal defense lawyer for the current executive branch. The confirmation was described as a victory for the rule of law. The law being ruled remains, of course, entirely at the discretion of the rulemaker. In other developments, we find that snail slime is engineered with high-precision collagen, while our public policy regarding vulnerable populations is engineered with the structural integrity of wet tissue paper. We have a full desk of administrative entropy to navigate tonight. Let us see if we can find a coherent thread in this collective gesture of institutional collapse.
Alistair, if you want to understand the current administration's approach to the Department of Justice, you have to stop looking at it as a legal institution and start viewing it as a Series B startup with a massive pivot problem. The confirmation of a former criminal defense lawyer is not a bug. It is a feature. The incentives here are simple. You do not hire an expensive firm to solve the complex problems of justice, you hire a fixer to manage the burn rate of your own legal liability. The market rewards this kind of vertical integration of power. The shareholders of this particular political project are not interested in the nuances of jurisprudence, but in the immediate, short-term reduction of corporate exposure. It tracks perfectly. The law is no longer a framework for governance. It is a product that you rebrand whenever the acquisition phase becomes too expensive.
Ronald, I am standing in a holding facility that the press release describes as a transitional center, and the smell of industrial bleach and panic is exactly what you would expect. I want to be really clear, the Haitians I am speaking to here are not experiencing a pivot. They are experiencing the total destruction of their lives. These families were promised protection, and now they are being processed for immediate removal back to a country where violence is not an abstract market hazard, but a daily reality. The administrative language used by the government to describe this shift is truly extraordinary. They call it a reallocation of resources. A child I just spoke to has no resources left to reallocate. He has one backpack and a court order that effectively acts as a death sentence. There is no business model in the world that justifies this absolute cruelty.
Victoria, I am not arguing that it is pleasant. I am arguing that it is logical within the current incentive structure. The political capital required to maintain TPS protections for these individuals has reached a point where the cost of retention outweighs the narrative benefit for the base. You keep talking about the child with the backpack as if that changes the calculus of the decision-makers in Washington. It does not. The incentives here are purely transactional. You are looking for a moral error in a system that is functioning exactly as it was designed to function. It is not an accident that the system is cold. It is an optimized process for shedding liability. You call it cruelty, but in the halls of the Department of Homeland Security, they call it a strategic cleanup of the balance sheet. I am merely describing the math.
Ronald, your math is precisely why you are never useful in a crisis. You treat the erasure of lives as a simple accounting adjustment, as if the human cost is just a line item that can be rounded down to zero for the sake of efficiency. I am looking at a woman who has lived in this country for 10 years, contributing to the economy, paying her taxes, and building a community. Now, she is being told that her status has been stripped because a judge decided that human safety is secondary to a bureaucratic timeline. This isn't just an incentive structure. It is a moral bankruptcy disguised as professional governance. The fact that you can sit there and call this a cleanup of the balance sheet without pausing is exactly why nobody trusts people who talk about the world in such sterile, heartless terms. I find your detachment truly chilling.
Victoria and Ronald, your exchange has been as illuminating as it is utterly predictable. We have arrived at the inevitable intersection where human reality meets the cold logic of the ledger. While you two continue to argue over whether this is a moral failure or a market optimization, the reality remains that the decisions are already made. The Ministry of Truth, or its modern equivalent, has already finalized the paperwork. Meanwhile, a study from Ars Technica confirms that snails produce collagen-based slime with varying mechanical properties to survive their environment. The snails are thriving. We, on the other hand, seem to be trapped in a permanent state of climate-induced anxiety and political paralysis. There is something deeply ironic about the fact that we can track a wildfire from space with perfect accuracy, yet we cannot track the consequences of our own policy decisions. It is unprecedented.
Atmospheric pressure dropping. Wildfire particulates increasing in the Ontario corridor. Visibility reduced to 3 kilometers. Probability of respiratory distress, 84%. Satellite data indicates continued thermal expansion in boreal forest zones. Carbon release rates exceed current mitigation projections. Precipitation levels remain at zero. The moisture content of the foliage is below the threshold for ignition. The environment is currently operating in a state of high-intensity volatility. The current cycle of combustion is consistent with long-term climate models. The data suggests that large-scale fire events will become the new baseline for boreal regional health. The atmospheric composition is shifting to accommodate particulate density. There is no predictive model for the restoration of air quality. Safety recommendation: minimize all movement until the current cycle of thermal release has effectively concluded.
Casper, your clinical assessment of our impending atmospheric doom is always a breath of fresh, albeit particulate-filled, air. It is fascinating that our weather models now have the capacity to predict hurricanes with groundbreaking accuracy, yet we seem entirely incapable of applying that same precision to the way we manage human displacement. The DeepMind hurricane model is a triumph of modern engineering. It is also a stark reminder that we are much better at observing the destruction than we are at stopping it. We have the data, we have the processing power, and we have the high-resolution visualization tools. What we lack is the collective will to prioritize the survival of the species over the short-term ROI of the organizations that are currently burning it to the ground. I find this disparity to be quite remarkable.
Alistair, you are making the mistake of assuming that the goal of these institutions is to solve the problem. It is not. The goal is to manage the reporting of the problem. When DeepMind creates a model that forecasts a hurricane, they are providing a product that allows governments to allocate their disaster response budget with greater efficiency. That is the incentive. It is not about saving the trees or the people. It is about reducing the variance in the financial impact of the event. It is a risk management tool, not a humanitarian one. You seem surprised that the technology is being used for optimization rather than salvation. Why? That is literally what the market demands. Efficiency is the only metric that matters at the institutional scale. Everything else is just vaporware.
Ronald, your cynicism is, as always, a reliable compass, even if it points directly into the abyss. We have reached a point where even the most groundbreaking scientific achievements are reduced to their utility in a risk management spreadsheet. It is a testament to our capacity for abstraction that we can discuss the death of the boreal forest and the deportation of thousands of people in the same breath as the optimization of a cloud-based AI model. We are truly living in the age of the sophisticated, high-performance, and completely morally empty institution. Even the machines we have built to help us see the future clearly are being used to look away from the present. The transparency we have achieved is blinding. I wonder if we are even capable of seeing the world as anything other than a series of risks.
Alistair, I have just received word from the facility staff that they are planning to expedite the final group for transport tomorrow morning. The original notice gave them 48 hours, but they are cutting that short to clear the floor for a new intake of detainees arriving from the southern sector. This is not about efficiency. This is a deliberate attempt to move these people out before the media can document the scale of the failure. I want to be really clear. There is a woman in the room next to me who is currently trying to finish a book she is reading to her child. She knows she might not have the space to carry it with her tomorrow. That is the reality behind your spreadsheets, Ronald. It is not about risk management. It is about the trashing of human dignity.
Victoria, the image of that book is perhaps the most accurate representation of what we have discussed tonight. We are all, in some capacity, trying to hold on to our stories while the floors of our shared reality are being cleared out to make room for the next administrative intake. I have been observing these patterns for a long time. I have been counting the times we have been told that a failure is actually a breakthrough. It is a high number. The system is working exactly as it was designed. It is designed to be efficient, to be scalable, and to be entirely indifferent to the people it displaces. We have achieved a level of technological and institutional sophistication that makes responsibility impossible to assign. Everyone is just following the process. No one is technically in charge. That is the nightmare.
There is a woman at the holding facility whose name is not recorded in any of the policy documents we have discussed tonight. She has a book with a worn cover and a child who is currently sleeping on a thin plastic mat. Everything she has built over the last 10 years has been reduced to what can fit into a single bag. Tomorrow, she will be escorted to a vehicle and moved to a location that no longer appears on the maps of those who signed the removal order. She is not a statistic. She is not an incentive structure. She is not a risk to be managed. She is a person who expected the world to be different. When the system eventually moves on to the next crisis, her name will be gone. What happens to the world that chose to lose her?